because we know how hard it is and we know how lonely and alienating it can be. And we want to do better for the next generation. We don't want them to just like stand on our shoulders. We want them to stand on our hands, and we want to press our hands all the way up over our head. And I think that's what fuels our industry.
I'm Caitlin, a former professional ballerina turned dance educator and career mentor, and this is the Brainy Ballerina podcast. I am here for the aspiring professional ballerina who wants to learn what it really takes to build a smart and sustainable career in the dance industry. I'm peeling back the curtain of the professional dance world with open and honest conversations about the realities of becoming a professional dancer. Come along to gain the knowledge and inspiration you need to succeed in a dance career on your terms.
Hello and welcome to the Brainy Ballerina podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Sloan, and I am joined today by Jennifer Milner. Jennifer is a ballet coach and certified Pilates trainer specializing in working with dancers. After a successful career as a ballet and musical theater dancer, she became certified in Pilates with Kelly Kane and mentored under Marika Molnar for her dance medicine certification. She's trained dancers from the Royal Ballet, New York City Ballet, American Ballet Theatre, San Francisco Ballet, and the Kirov Ballet, just to name a few. Jennifer and I have really connected over our passion for shaping healthy dancers, both physically and emotionally, and I'm so excited to chat with her today. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today, Caitlin.
Of course, I'm so thrilled to talk to you more, and I just want to start from the very beginning about why you stepped into your very first dance class.
I'm pretty sure I stepped into my first dance class because my mom was my first dance teacher. She taught me at home till I was old enough to go to dance class. She wasn't like one of those crazy, you must dance people, but she had grown up as a dancer and she still loved it. And she became a teacher at the studio that I grew up at. So she was definitely my first dance teacher, and it was very natural for me to go into the studio. And once I got in, I didn't want to leave.
So, what was your training like as a child? Did you mostly have your mom as your dance teacher?
I actually didn't have my mom very much as a child. I'm not sure if that was her choice or mine, but I worked with her, when I was at home before I was old enough to go to ballet class. And this was back when dancers didn't really start training until they were maybe 8 years old, which is still very much the case in Europe and in Russia. So there wasn't the 3-year-old pre-ballet classes and that sort of thing. So when I started my formal training, I did take class with her and a few other teachers. My teacher trained with Natalia Krasovska from Ballet Russe. And so my training was very much Vaganova with some other, a little bit of American thrown in there, but very Vaganova based. I was extraordinarily lucky that I had a teacher who could teach a great technique, but also was not as emotionally charged of an atmosphere as they have been, as classes have been in the past, if you know what I mean. She was very encouraging and supportive. She was tough and strict, but it never felt personal or like she was trying to tear us down to make it happen. So my training was purely ballet until I got into like community musical theater. Somebody hired my teacher to choreograph a local musical, and of course she made her dancers be in it. And I was like, this is amazing. And I had fallen in love with all the MGM musicals on TV, getting to watch Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, and I had watched those my whole life. And so it was a really natural fit for me to go into musical theater as well. But ballet was my true passion, and it was the only thing I was trained in until after high school. So there was no jazz, tap, nothing like that until after high school.
Okay, so after high school, what was your path? Did you go straight into your professional career?
Well, I started my professional ballet career before I got out of high school, actually, and spent time at Pittsburgh Ballet Theatre as an apprentice, and then had a back injury, of course, which took me out for almost a year, and then had one of those, seminal moments in your life where I ended up back in Pittsburgh, and it seemed clear to them that, or to me from them, that they thought that I had not advanced as far as I should have. And I overheard them talking in one of those crushing moments when they were like, oh, it's too bad about Jennifer. She would have been a great dancer. And I was 15 or maybe 16 by then. And it was that, oh gosh, so my career's over. Like, too late, which of course is ridiculous now. And I would have been a much better dancer 6 months later if I had known and if I had had someone like me to work with. But that for me was sort of the pin in my ballet career, brief as it was. And I transitioned to musical theater. I had had fun in it, and I had people start calling me and asking me if I would do shows. So I did my first professional show for musical theater 2 weeks before I graduated from high school. I left high school early to go and do a show and just started working from there very much as a dancer still. I continued to dance ballet and I danced professionally like as a pickup dancer for big shows like Nutcracker. But my ballet career was a very short stint in Boston and then in Pittsburgh. And that was definitely something that shaped how I approach the ballet world now. And the thought of even discussing that a 16-year-old is, too old to get any better or too old to improve more is just makes me horribly mad. So after high school, I started my musical theater career and had a super successful one and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that is just absolutely heartbreaking to hear something like that at 15 or 16 years old because there's dancers who become professional dancers who don't even start dancing until they're older. You don't have
Hmm.
to start when you're super young, like you said. You hear a lot of people saying, I started dancing when I was 3 years old. I started dancing when I was 10, which even I think people thought was maybe a little bit old. But it's like, what is this arbitrary timeline we're putting on dancers
Hmm.
that's saying your career is over if you haven't reached what we perceive to be a certain point. And maybe for that company, sure, maybe they had decided, okay, this wasn't where you needed to be for our company, but that doesn't mean there's not other places you could dance and have gone. But just as a young teenager, you don't know that.
Right.
And you look up to these people and you trust their guidance. And if they say you're not good enough, who are you to argue with them at that point? And it's just so heartbreaking to hear that.
Well, and at that point, I had been at Pittsburgh when Patricia Wilde had just come on, and was really fortunate to have her see something in me and get to be mentored by her and work with her. And she wasn't the person saying these things, but I felt invested in, and then I felt, oh, too bad, and not even the hey, we should work with her and try to get her back from her injury. It was just a, and of course, at that moment, I didn't stop and think to myself, well, what are some other companies? Well, what are some other places that I should apply or audition or maybe finish high school before I stress about this? But to me, it was like, okay, well, that's what they said. So I guess it's time to close up and move on.
Yeah. So you moved to New York City and you're doing musical theater. And how long were you in that part of the industry?
I was in that industry for a long time. I didn't move to New York City. I did a 2-year musical theater conservatory, very similar to AMDA in New York. It's all singing, dancing, and acting to help me get stronger as a triple threat because it was really important in musical theater to be able to do as much as possible. And I finished that when I was 19, but was performing the whole time as well, and spent probably 4 years just traveling the country and doing shows in different towns and moved to New York when I was 22 and was there, gosh, 12 years, I think. I was there 12 years, yes, doing shows there. So it was another great example of how there are so many options out there. And some people think, well, either I have to live in New York City or I can't do musical theater. Like it's Broadway or nothing. But there are so many great regional theaters, union and non union, where you can work and you can build your resume, you can make a living, you can have a really fulfilling career. So it's again one of those things where it wasn't time for me to move to New York. I was making a good living traveling around and performing and really enjoying it. And then there was just a moment where I was like, okay, now it's time to move to New York, try to dig in and get into a big show.
And what was that like? What's the audition process like when you moved to New York? How did you know about auditions? How did you, yeah, all of that.
It can be very daunting. Back in my day, there was a newspaper that was published called Backstage that was weekly, and it would have all the auditions published in that. Now it's online, and you can just go and see what the auditions are that are scheduled. If you're a member of Actors Equity, there's a call board at the Equity building, and you can go in and check the call board and see what auditions are posted there. But in general, they'll post and announce an audition, and you'll try to go in and sign up that day to get in to be seen. If you're trying to get into a big show and you don't have a union card, it's really, really hard because they're required to see union people first. And if they have time at the end, they'll look at non-union people. I know a lot of friends who show up and just sit there all day and wait and hope that they can be seen at the end of the day because they don't have a union card. And the best way to get seen is to have a union card, but you can't get one until you work for a union house. And so it can be a little difficult and it can be pretty stressful. Once you do your audition, then you sit around and wait. Or I would go in the morning and audition for a non-union show, and I would get there at maybe 4 o'clock in the morning to get in line in this huge line outside the building and hope that I was early enough that I would get a close enough spot that they would be able to see me that day. And then you sign up, you pick a time from whatever's available, and hopefully it's a time when you don't have to be at work. And you go off and work or start your day and then find a bathroom somewhere to get changed and come back and throw yourself in there and audition and then leave and hope they call you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think that's still the process, or do you know, is that still the process now with how we're using the internet and everything more so? Is it still you go stand in line at 4 a.m.?
You still go stand in line because I have a dancer graduating from NYU right now, and she is doing a lot of auditions in musical theater. And she and I have talked about this. So she is still standing in line. She is still coming back at the end of the day, hoping that there's time for people to see her. There's definitely ways that you can sign up online if they're looking for appointments ahead of time. If they want you to submit your headshot and resume, maybe your reel, and then they'll tell you if they're interested and let you sign up for a time. But for big chorus stuff, for musicals, a lot of it is just show up and hope. If you get invited to a call by the choreographer, of course, that's great. Otherwise, it truly is what we call the cattle calls. And it's very different from the ballet world because the ballet world, as you know, is cyclical. And we have those periods of, okay, it's January, we can start sending reels across people's desks. We can ask to be invited to company class. We can start trying to find those open auditions. And I help my dancers through that process. And it's super frustrating because there's nothing codified about it, which drives me bananas, right? Like in my world, dancers will be told whether or not their contract's going to be renewed at a company by, let's say, the end of January. And then all companies have all of February and March to audition people, and then new contracts have to be offered by March 31st, and then new contracts have to be signed by April 30th, or something like that, just so that dancers know I'm not going to have a contract. I should go look, or I have a contract, I shouldn't look. So it can be really frustrating, I know, with that audition season. But the musical theater world kind of never stops. Like there's big auditions in January and February for summer shows. There's big auditions in the fall, often for new Broadway shows, but it's a constant process and you're constantly thinking, if I go out of town, am I going to miss an audition? If I take a vacation, is something big going to come up? And you just don't know. So it can be really stressful.
That is really stressful, especially trying to balance other jobs or
Hmm.
every kind of commitment. I love what you said about ballet auditions. I 100% agree. It's just so messy how it's done. And I had that experience of being at my very first company, and I didn't know I didn't have a contract for the next year until after my final show. And I remember that there was a list of people written on the wall of when we were having our personals, and there was two groups of people, and there was one group of people who ended up getting contracts and they had theirs before the last show, and then everyone who wasn't getting asked back had theirs after the last show, and the writing was on the wall. I
Literally.
yeah, but before that I kind of knew where I stood, and I kind of knew that I wasn't necessarily my happiest. It was slightly mutual, although I might have said yes if I had gotten the contract, but I think it's time for me to move on. And so I had been auditioning, I had been sending my things out, but still, I didn't know for sure what was going to happen until after that last show. And I don't know, like you said, they should really tell you so much earlier in the season because it's a lot of time and effort to be going out there and doing it and trying to balance everything. It's so hard on dancers. And I don't know what companies think dancers are going to do, like if they're going to sabotage the rest of their season if they don't get a contract or something. We're professionals. We just want to
Right.
know what's going to happen.
Hmm.
We're not out there to just throw in the towel. We're still going to do our best work. We still care about our job. So I definitely agree with that idea of there should be a very codified timeline of when people know if they have a contract for the next year. Also saying, current dancers, let us know if you want your contract. So that when companies
Hmm.
go to audition, they can say, we have so many contracts available. Because a lot of times it's just like, well, we're auditioning. just in case we have contracts available,
Just
but
in
we might not even
case,
have
right.
anything. And then it's just so frustrating for dancers who pay money and travel and time and resources. And obviously, I'm a little worked up about this because I am so passionate about this process and how just difficult it is in an already difficult career.
I think it was a major national company in ballet last year that had 800 female dancers show up for their audition because the dancers had heard there were actually contracts there, and there ended up being two. And so that's 798 women who spent so much money and so much time to get there. And yeah, I wish that there was a way to codify it. And I wish so much is based on innuendo. And like you said, you could see the writing on the wall. You knew you weren't perhaps right a good fit for that place. But I have a friend who was getting the feeling that the company wasn't happy with him. So he ended up going to take company class at another major company. That company told his company about it, and his company got furious and angry and definitely started giving him the treatment of not getting cast as much, all of those sorts of things. And he was like, I thought you weren't going to hire me back. And it was clear miscommunication and horrible management on their part, but it resulted in him not having that safety of, oh, wait, my company still believes in me because he thought he wasn't going to be asked back. So, yes, if we could wave our magic wand, we would codify this whole thing and everybody would talk to each other with respect.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've heard the same thing of friends or dancers I work with who are sneaking around almost to go audition
Hmm.
because they're scared of being found out. But all they're really trying to do is just protect their livelihood and make sure they have a
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
And it's just mind-boggling that that is seen as disrespectful or as you're not caring about our company. We have to make sure we have a job.
Yeah. Yeah. You do. And it's not that you don't care, it's that you have to put a roof over your head and
Exactly.
pay for your gas. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that's so interesting to think about because it's for audition season for ballet companies, it's such a sprint almost. You're like, okay, I have this certain amount of time, I have to just power through. And for you living in New York City, it's a marathon. You're constantly having to go auditions. How do you keep yourself going?
I think you have to make choices. And when I was very young and very new to New York, like I would throw myself at everything, just thinking a big swath of exposure was the best. And I learned very quickly do some research into the company. If you don't see yourself wanting to work there, if the contract is going to be a time when you're needing to be with your brother for his wedding and it's only a 4-week contract, well, that's probably not the right gig for you. And so I just had to learn to pace myself with that and to maintain my own instrument because nobody else was going to do that for me. So in the dance world, you have a pretty codified way of doing things. You take company class, you work on variations, you go to rehearsal, all of these things that help you maintain your instrument. And when you are a freelancer, whether it's musical theater or ballet, concert dance, it's up to you. And the concert dancers that I work with, or not concert dancers, the freelancers that I work with, they work really hard to make sure that they continue to stay motivated to work with private coaches, to work with me, to be in a regular ballet class with friends that are going to hold them accountable. So it's quite difficult. And for me, I had to figure out here's my regular dance classes. I'm going to do, Chet Walker's musical theater class, and I'm going to do Elena's ballet class, and I'm going to build that schedule. I'm going to take my voice lessons, and I'm going to give myself a break if I can't, right? Like say it's okay if I just can't do it that day, but I have to kind of make it my unpaid job because I eventually want it to be my paid job. And so I have to invest that time, and it definitely requires discipline. And again, it's just like a freelance dancer. So many people think that's going to be great and I'm going to go off and do a bunch of nutcrackers and have all the money I need for the year. But to walk in prepared to do a nutcracker paw and only have to work for 2 days requires months of preparation, right? Finding your partner, being in good shape, like maintaining it, maintaining your contacts. And so it requires an insane amount of discipline to be a freelance dancer, and not just like physical discipline, but mental work discipline.
Yeah, I feel like I've worked with dancers in the past who are struggling to get into their dance classes because all of a sudden they have 6 survival jobs that
Hmm.
they're working, and that comes first because they have to have money. But then all of a sudden they look around, they go, I moved to New York City to dance and I'm not even taking class because I'm just so busy working. And so it's kind of reworking that schedule to, of course, with the understanding that they have to have these jobs to pay the rent, but also what's the ultimate goal to dance, so make sure that those classes, like you said, you have your regular weekly schedule and that's non negotiable. and you go to those first and then you put everything else in those time slots when you're not doing that to be able to make sure that you are moving toward your ultimate goal.
Well, and for a dancer, a freelance dancer in New York, that could look like having a couple of gig jobs. For me, I was a personal assistant, I was a closet organizer, I worked as a temp, so I could pick up jobs that would last as long or as short as I wanted. But it was jobs that gave me the freedom. I was a toy demonstrator at FAO Schwartz, like just the time freedom to do what I needed to do when I needed to do it, but would give me the most bang for my buck work wise. But there's always also for dancers, struggling choreographers who are looking for dancers to work for little or no pay. And that can be a great way to, number one, stay in shape, and number two, start to form a community in the city that you're in. Then you have to be careful as you're doing that, that doesn't become your job and you don't start to settle into that and work all day for money and then dance all night for free. So you don't want to end up in that position because you're a dancer and you deserve to be paid for it. But doing those short-term things can help keep you in shape and again, treat it like a job and help you make those connections too.
Yeah, I feel like people sometimes draw this line in the sand of it being so black or white of, you shouldn't work for free or you should. And it's really just every situation is different. And sometimes it will be beneficial to say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit creatively dried out. I'm not getting in class enough. I want to just do some choreography and work with someone because it will feel good and feed me and keep me in shape and those kind of things. And it's okay to do that if you feel like that is the right path for you. And like you said, you have to be careful you don't fall into the trap of that's your only thing. But it's okay to decide, yeah, this will provide value for me in another way, even if it's not paid, and make
Mhm.
that choice. It's very, very tricky trying to decipher that, I think. How did you decipher those things as a dancer?
Well, for me, I had to get paid. And whether it was money or it was emotional reward, there had to be something there. So, or, career advancement in some way, but that's a really dangerous way to look at getting paid because everybody's going to try to sell you on that. So, if I was offered a job, let's say selling perfume, and they wanted me to tap dance while I was doing it, not kidding, I have done this. And they were like, well, we can't really pay you, but it would be great exposure. No, it's not. Nobody's going to stop the person in Macy's and say, hey, could you come to an audition, right? They're using my skill to move product. So for that, I could very politely say, no, here's my wage. Up to you whether or not you do it. But if it was somebody who was like, man, I haven't choreographed in a month, I'm feeling the bug. Do you and the rest of our friends want to go down and do something? Maybe see if we could scrape together 10 people to watch it. Like, I would just love to do that. Then I would be like, yes, because that would feed me as well. So if somebody calls you, like, let's say Radio City Music Hall, and they say, we can't afford to pay you, but we would love for you to be a Rockette. Well, your Radio City Music Hall you can afford, right? So if it's a big venue like a large sports show, right? For example, you know that they should be paying their dancers. If it's something small or if it's something that's going to really feed you, I feel like that's a different kind of payment. So for me, it was, what am I going to get out of this? Am I going to get an actual connection to somebody important? And selling Armani perfume is not going to get me connected to Giorgio Armani, right? But how's it going to feed me?
That's what all it comes down to in the end is you deciding for yourself because it is so easy for people to say, oh, this is going to be great exposure for you. This is going to connect you to the right people. But you have to look back into yourself and say, is this the exposure that I actually want? Is this great exposure for me? Is this the connections I even want to build?
Mhm.
And then you can decide if that is something to move forward with or not.
Yep. Well, and I've had dancers take, I have a professional dancer who took a contract a couple years ago with a company that was a smaller company than she actually could have had a contract with. She's a pretty well established dancer, but she took it with this company because they did more contemporary stuff than she's used to. And she knew she could spend that year upping her game in that area. She would still make money. She would still be moving herself forward as a ballet dancer, still building her resume. But for her, the big bonus was stretching herself in that other direction. And at the end of the year, she knew it was time for her to move on and take what she had used and grown with and very politely and professionally move to the next thing. So it was a very strategic decision on her part. The other company wasn't upset about it because they got this amazing dancer. And so there's lots of ways for you to say, what's in it for me? She got a roof over her head. She also got a year of really stretching herself and building her rep in an area that she wasn't as well established in. That was a really smart move, I think, that we don't always think about.
Yeah, for sure.
According to a survey of dancers conducted by Minding the Gap, 75% of dancers reported experiencing a mental health challenge in the past 5 years. To say dancers need mental health support ASAP is an understatement, which is why I am so excited to tell you about DanceSense Council for Educators. DanceSense Council for Educators gives you dancer mental wellness information, tips, and exercises in whatever format works best for you. Need a short video about how to help dancers through perfectionism? They've got you. Want to listen to a self talk podcast on your drive? Absolutely. How about real time virtual sessions with mental health professionals? It's all inside your membership. And this isn't just fluff. All resources are science backed and created in partnership with DanceSend's Advisory Board of Mental Health Professionals. As a partner of DanceSend, I've got a gift for you. Enter code BRAINY at checkout to try 1 full month for free. You truly have nothing to lose. Try it out for free and see if it's the right fit for you. If not, no worries. Although I am pretty sure you're going to be as obsessed as I am. This membership is the real deal. I know you want to give your dancers the best support possible. That's why I can't wait for you to get your hands on this resource. Tap the link in the show notes and enter code BRAINY to try DanceSense Council free today.
So you're dancing in New York, you've had this long career, and then you have a significant injury that ends up being career ending. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I was dancing and I was in Phantom of the Opera and started to have knee issues, couldn't quite get on top of it, and ended up leaving the show and trying to deal with it and going through workman's comp and through all of the physical therapy and all of that kind of stuff. And while I was in the midst of it, I was also doing Pilates because that was something I had started a few years prior and found that it really made me feel good and was a great complement to dancing. So I was doing that, and my physical therapist, and physical therapists, man, they are the dance world's mental health therapists. They're like the first responders, right? So all physical therapists end up sort of becoming your mental health therapist as well. And they don't even want to, but you feel vulnerable and you feel like someone cares about you, and so you start talking. So I was processing with her. She's like, "Well, why don't you get certified in Pilates while you're trying to recover from your injury? Like, this is a great time to try to do something like that." And it was a good way for me to transition to something other than dance without thinking I'm done with dance now. So that was a very gentle way for me to transition. I got certified, did a couple more shows, but never really got back and realized, this is it for my knee. I've done a few other shows as a singer and an actor, but that was it for me dance wise. And I started actually working where I was getting PT. The owner, Marika Molnar, saw me and was like, "I want you to come work here with the dancers." And so I was really fortunate to get a job working for New York City Ballet's PT clinic and getting to start helping dancers from the other side of the injury and seeing all that I had to offer from my multiple injuries and my sympathy, and realized I really loved it. And I loved the chance to work with dancers at their most vulnerable and be able to say, "Hey, I've been in the same place as you. And let's just keep moving forward one step at a time and let's see what's going to happen." And then figuring out how to take dancers that were perfectly healthy and make them even better, even healthier, even stronger, even more artistic, even more technically brilliant. And it was just a huge mind shift for me that it didn't have to be, "Oh no, now I have to leave the dance world and never see it again and never contribute." But I still have something to offer, and this is a great way to do that. So I transitioned into to what I do now.
Tell us exactly what you do now. Because you're so multi-talented and I'm sure it's hard to put it into a few minutes, but I feel like you have so many skills and dancers out there who might need someone just like you, they don't even know you exist. So what exactly do you do?
Well, so I'm a Pilates teacher, I'm a ballet coach, and I'm a movement specialist. And that's the way I try to sort of sum it up and describe it. I work with a lot of pre professional dancers, and so there ends up being a significant mentorship aspect to it. So I lean a little bit towards let's process through that. Let's talk about it, talking to their parents and helping them understand what can be a super bewildering ballet world. So there's definitely that aspect to it. It's not really what I do, but I know that it comes with that job. So I really feel invested in the whole dancer. I have probably 60% pre-professional and 40% professional. And it might look like if there's a dancer in the same city as me, we might work in the Pilates studio for a day and then go work on her Kitri variation in the ballet studio. And we might stop in the middle of that Kitri variation and hit the floor and do a few exercises to try to help her body get a concept that's going to make turns from fifth easier or something. So it's really satisfying to me to be able to do both on the same person and sort of put all of that together. I feel like I can take something and make it better. I don't have the gift that some ballet teachers do of starting with young kids and creating this amazing base of technique and knowledge. I can take what I see, what already exists, and say, hey, did you know you are? Or let's try this. And take what already exists there and amplify it. So that's what I love to do the most. But I also teach workshops for dance educators, for dance studio owners, for dancers, for Pilates teachers, for dance medicine and science professionals. I teach workshops. I do, hypermobility is one of my areas of expertise. So I teach a lot about how to work with hypermobility, especially in the dance world. And I have a huge passion for mental health in the dance world. And so I work in that arena as well. And then work with IADMs, presenting workshops at the conferences and stuff. So I do a lot, mostly because I love a lot, and that's what I love to do. And the things that I'm passionate about that I can't do, like I send people to you regularly because I know that you do that better than I could. And she and I can have a chat, but then I'm like, hey, let's get you to Caitlin, let's do this. Or let's get you to a PT and let's do this, or a nutritionist. So I really love being the person that ties all of those things together.
Absolutely, and being this part of this community, I feel like I've met so many people like you just through Instagram mainly, and I have definitely my I go back and forth whether I want to just completely delete Instagram or whether I, like, love it, but some days I'm like, "I'm done." But for the
Right.
most part, I just love these connections we made and the fact that I just met you through there and found a whole other part of the dance world that I wouldn't have known existed and that I didn't know existed when I was dancing, that I didn't have access to
Yeah.
because I didn't know it was there.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so amazing for dancers to have someone like you who has knowledge in so many ways and also is just such a good guide. Like you said, you do so much mentorship. And at the end of the day, what I can tell about you, that's maybe the most important thing is that you are their advocate. You are in their corner and you want dancers to have a voice and to feel confident in their careers.
Yep. I want to create healthy, autonomous dancers who are happy humans and strong, happy dancers. And that is what really gets me up in the morning. A friend of mine said, Josephine Lee said that she firmly believes that we become the person that we needed when we were 12 years old. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I see the passion of so many of my friends in this business, like you, that are like, man, I wish I had been around when I when I was working, right? And
Hmm.
and I think we do that to step in that gap and fill those holes because we know how hard it is and we know how lonely and alienating it can be, and we want to do better for the next generation. We don't want them to just like stand on our shoulders. We want them to stand on our hands, and we want to press our hands all the way up over our head. And I think that's what fuels our industry.
Yeah, I am curious because we've talked a little bit about some of the struggles we face. And like you said, we know what it's like to be in this industry and we know how hard it can be and also how joyful it can be when you connect with your job and when you feel healthy and happy and like you are a whole person outside of the dance world. And I'm curious, what are some of the things that dancers come to you with, or what are some of the biggest struggles that you see facing dancers currently?
First of all, social media. It's really difficult to find that balance. And my favorite dancers that struggle with social media are the ones that I have to push to post. Like they never post. And I'm like, listen, this is your resume. So you want to start posting pictures of you in class, whatever. But that's my favorite kind of problem on Instagram. More likely, it's dancers of color who just don't see themselves in their feed daily. And so we'll sit down and we'll go through and I'll send them some of my favorite dancers of color to follow so that they can see more of themselves when they're scrolling through. Or dancers who are really struggling with how they look and they see all these amazing posts by dancers who are using all these filters, who don't acknowledge college that it took them 11 tries to get that one shot that they have on there. So I know social media is a huge problem. I also think that they are having a really hard time. I feel like the center of the dance world, there's, top contracts, which are super clear cut, and there's the bottom schools, which are super clear cut. And the center of it is really mushy right now and really difficult to understand. And so many of my pre-pro to young pro dancers are super bewildered. What's a trainee, and is the trainee higher than a PTD, or is the PTD and then the apprentice, is that better than getting second company, and what's the difference between studio company and second company? And it differs from place to place. And I truly feel like it is this muddy because dance companies are allowing it to be muddy so that it's difficult to get a grip on, so that they can get a fair amount of work out of these dancers for a reasonably small amount of money, you know? So that's one of the biggest challenges I think they face right now, is figuring out that very early start to their career. Should I take a core job at a company that's not as big? Or should I take an unpaid, crappy job at a bigger company, even if they probably don't like me? Like, let's say, complete hypothetical, someone who's super short and they got offered something with Ballet West, but Ballet West has said, we probably won't hire you, but you could do this for a year. Like, should I do that? So I have Ballet West on my resume, or should I go do this smaller company and maybe progress, but not be happy? So I'm sure you see that all the time too, but there's a muddiness to it. When I was dancing, it was apprentice was the bottom, and you were still part of the company. There was no trainees. ABT had
Hmm.
a second company, but it was a very clear cut second company. There was no YAGP. There was nothing like that. So there were no, like, I could go this path or this path. Should I go all in on competitions and hope that it helps raise my visibility? Or should I just hunker down and study and then try to get a contract somewhere? Yeah, I'm making it muddy because it is muddy. And I know that's probably one of your pet peeves, but that's a huge thing that I see dancers struggle with, because there's just no clear path. There's no property ladder to get on, to start climbing and trying to move forward that's clear.
That's one of the biggest questions that I get constantly. Like, what is the trajectory? What is the ladder? Where do I start? Like you said, should I take this job that's maybe more prestigious, or this one that actually pays me? And it's so hard because when you talk to dancers, they want you just to tell them, do this. It's not that easy.
Hmm.
Everyone has a different path that's right for them. Like you said earlier with your client who chose to go to a company that was smaller but was going to give her that contemporary training, or not training, but experience that she
Experience, yeah.
needed. And so it's different for every single dancer what they're going to need. And that's what, we do with our clients, is talk through it with them and really start to lay out the different options and decide what's the next right path. And I think that's the hardest thing for dancers when they're young. And for me, it was looking at my entire life ahead of me and thinking that this choice was it, instead of going, okay, I think for the next 1 year, this is going to be a good option for me, and I'm going to try this. And if I hate it, I can change my mind. Or if it's not for me, I can change my mind. I can do something else. And of course, there's always these sliding doors in life. And I always have these moments of, what if I had chosen that? Where would I be now? But then I always come back to, well, if I had chosen to take this contract or go to this school, would I have my kids that I have now? Would I have be married to my husband? There's all these things in my life that have happened because of the choices I made. And so it's so easy at the time to get wrapped up in this idea of I need to make the right decision. And I think realizing there isn't a right decision, it's just what feels like it will help me get to where I want to be in the next step.
Hmm.
And not knowing for sure, but
Yeah.
knowing that you will learn something from it.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I tell my dancers all the time, is it's so easy for them to get hung up. Just like on the injury side, if they're injured, they're like, I'm going to be out of Nutcracker. Oh no. And I'm like, child, you will be doing 30 more Nutcrackers.
You're good.
It's okay. But it feels so heartbreaking in that moment to have
Mhm.
to miss that one thing. And so training them to see the big picture of their career physically, sit out now, and you won't have to sit out for 6 months a year from now. And the same thing goes with your work, is this the right thing for me to do now? And is it the right path to take now? You're not stuck with it. You can do anything you want. And you always have that choice of doing something else, right? You are not going to be stuck at whatever place you pick for the next 20 years. Yes, you have moved a U-Haul there, and yes, all of that. You've put in a phone line. What, I guess people don't do that anymore. You've put in internet, but it's okay. You can disconnect the internet, drive to another town. Like, it's going to be all right. So, is this a choice for you to make right now? And that really helps you to step back and say, I'm looking at all my stuff. And for me right now, where I am, that's the right thing to do. And I'm going to have to be content with that. And a year from now, I'm going to have to look back and remember this decision I made and say, but that was the right thing for me to do then. So I'm not going to beat myself up, and I'm going to figure out the right thing for me to do now at this moment. And the other thing I tell my dancers, because when you're working out, you have a lot of time to talk. Well, I ask them, what do you want to do when you stop dancing? And for a lot of dancers, they don't want to think about that because they're like, oh, I'm never going to stop dancing. And I'm like, you are. You're going to stop dancing either when you're 15 or 75, but at some point you're going to stop dancing. And so what do you think you'd want to do with your day? And when they look at it that way, it's a lot easier for them. And if you start thinking about that now while you're dancing, you're going to become a happier and more contented person because you won't have your identity just tied up as a dancer. So if you start thinking now, well, what would I enjoy doing if dance didn't exist? And that's another question I ask my dancers. And one of my dancers said I would invent dance. but but if dance didn't exist, what would you do and what would you have fun with? Would you be on Great British Bake Off? Like, would you move to Europe and try to do that? Like, what would you want to do? And start feeding that side of yourself. Don't even think about it as preparing for your next career, but just feed that side of yourself. And all of a sudden, you're going to have something that you super enjoy doing. If there's a shutdown like COVID, or you decide that dancing is no longer for you. So I think for a variety of reasons, it's really important as a dancer to, number one, find a passion outside of dance, and number two, show yourself grace in the decisions that you make and understand that you are doing the best you can with where you are at that time, and it's okay.
Yeah, I think for so many dancers, we've almost grown up believing that it's like sacrilegious to dream of a different life or think of anything else you like to do. And I feel like for a lot of dancers I talk to, also, I ask them that question and it's like a total mind blank. They have no idea. They've never thought about it. And it's like they just can't even come up with anything
Yeah.
that they would like to do. And like you said, you have to have other options. And it can still be like you and me. We obviously love dance so much, we decide to segue our careers to still be in the dance world. We're not on stage right now, but we're still in this industry. And
Mhm.
that's okay. You don't have to give up dance completely and just move out of the world. You can. Plenty of people do. There's options. But I think for young dancers, it is maybe just trying things. Look up a list of like 50 things you might like to do and just start trying some random things if you can't think of anything you want to do, because we can get so wrapped up in our dance world, and we come to this conclusion that if we're not always thinking about dance, training for dance in class, in rehearsal, then we're falling behind. And it couldn't be further from the truth, which we know now on this side of our careers, but it was hard to see at that time.
Absolutely. And I thought when I was leaving the dance world, or when I had to retire, I thought I can't go see dance. I can't do this. I can't, like, it took me a minute to not resent having to step into the theater at Lincoln Center to watch my dancers on stage. But I got there. And if you had told me when I was a teenager or early 20s that I would be doing what I do now, I would have said no way, because I was very adamant that I will not teach when I stopped dancing. I felt at the time that there were two kinds of teachers. There were the teachers who were retired dancers who didn't know what else to do with their lives, and so they taught. And then there were the teachers who were really good at it and did it because they were good at it. And I didn't think I'd be good at it. And I had so much respect for the good teachers who had been in my life and had experienced so many of the other teachers who weren't good, that I was like, I'm never going to teach. I'm never going to do that. And then I just kind of walked sideways into it and ended up loving it and feeling like I had something to offer. So you never know what's going to happen. And I think just leaving yourself open to what comes next is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I thought I had my whole life planned out,
Oh, sure.
and it changed. It obviously changed, and it's still changing. And but now it feels exciting instead of scary when new things
Hmm.
come up, because I used to feel like just so choices felt so scary. I'm still not the kind of person who wants to make a lot of choices. I'd rather have someone else choose where we're going for dinner or that kind of thing. Like, I'm not the kind of person who's going to jump at that. But for the big things, choices used to feel scary, and now they feel exciting because it's like, wow, how great is it to have options? How great
Mm.
is it to be able to forge your path? And I think for a lot of dancers, it does feel like circling back to your very first story about when you were 16 years old, it feels like our paths are decided for us by some magnanimous figure out there who's just decided what our career is going to look like. And we fall into this trap of always having people tell us what to do. We're so used to walking to a ballet class and we are told what to do for the entire 2 hours that we're there. And so to get to this point in your life where you realize, wait, I can make choices. And I wish I had realized that even sooner as a dancer because it was true then. I just
Mhm.
didn't know it.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things I think dancers struggle with is finding their voice and realizing that they do have choices. Because as you said, we have so few choices. When I work with dancers, when I train them, I give them as many choices as I can. You want to work with the red ball or the blue ball? What kind of music do you want to listen to today? And so many times they're like, I don't know, whatever you want to listen to. I'm like, no, no, it's okay to have an opinion. So I think that it's bred into us to keep us compliant, right? And to keep the system moving smoothly, and helping dancers find their autonomy and their voice is such an important part of the process. Even if it's just, talking to a 13-year-old and they'll say, well, what variation do you want to work on for competitions next year? Whatever my coach tells me. No, I get that. But what would you like to work on? Giselle Act One. Okay, what do you think you'd bring to the table for that? Like, what excites you about that? The pretty costume? Do you love the hops on point? Like, what is it about that? And what do you think would challenge you? Do you feel like you're more of a Kitri or a Giselle, like emotionally as a person? Just getting them to start seeing, oh, if my teacher wants me to do Kitri, I could come to her and respectfully say, would you consider Giselle Act One? And here is why. I really need to work on my hops on point or whatever. And the teacher may say no, but at least you've had a voice in the decision and you've had a voice in the process and you're learning to speak up for yourself. So learning to think through things and see what kind of dancer you are, recognizing your flaws and recognizing your gifts and being confident in them, snapping for yourself and not just the other dancers in the room. Um,
Hmm.
it's so hard for us, but taking ownership of our voice is so important.
And it takes practice.
Absolutely. Start with picking the music for the day.
Yep. Yep.
And for you, just start picking a restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. I still need to practice it. It's something that I have actively been trying to work on and even just noticing when I'm giving away my
Mhm,
choices.
mhm, and that's a choice.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
deciding, is this a choice I care to make or not? Because maybe I really don't care and I'm like, I'll take a back seat to this one, and maybe I do care and I've just been so ingrained into me that I don't get to be the one who chooses. And so it's even just noticing that and then making a decision is just practice.
Mhm.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I just want to ask you if you could give dancers one piece of advice as they're pursuing their careers, what do you think they need to know?
I think that dancers need to know that, and I tell this to my dancers all the time, that in their career, they have nothing to prove. They only have something to offer. And it's so important to see and to know who you are, to know what you have to offer, and to be okay if the other people don't want to accept that. Find somebody else who does want to accept what you have to offer. But know who you are. You don't need to be the next Tyler Peck. Tyler's doing a pretty good job of it. And you're not going to out Tyler. But you can be the first you and understand what makes you unique and amazing and understand what you have to offer. And then don't feel like you have to prove that to anyone. They're going to see it and accept that and make use of it, or they won't.
I think I need to hear that because I'm tearing up a little bit right now from
Oh,
that. That was so beautiful. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for all of your wisdom. You just always amaze me with
mm,
all of your wisdom you have to offer and just how caring you are about dancers that you work with is just a beautiful thing to see in an industry where that's not always the case. So I just really appreciate you. And can you tell everyone listening how they can get in touch with you, how they can work with you, or just even reach out to you?
sure. I am always up for answering questions, chatting, any of that stuff. My Instagram is Jennifer period Milner, and my website is Jennifer Milner, Jennifer. Last name is Milner. And you can message me there or on Instagram. And I work in person in the Dallas area or on Zoom all over the world, thanks to Zoom. And I love to meet new people and help them.
Amazing. I'll put that all in the show notes for everyone listening who wants to reach out for you. Thank you so much again, Jennifer.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for taking the time to have this conversation and to try to share these stories with other dancers.
Of course.
Thank you for tuning in to the Brainy Ballerina podcast. If you found this episode insightful, entertaining, or maybe a bit of both, I would so appreciate you taking a moment to leave a rating and hit subscribe. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll join our community of dancers passionate about building a smart and sustainable career in the dance industry. Plus, your ratings help others discover the show too. I'll be back with a new episode next week. In the meantime, be sure to follow along on Instagram at The Brainy Ballerina for your daily dose of dance career guidance.